This week, in our quest to find the worst content we can possibly watch, we decided to check out Madam Web in all of its glory. Yeah, what'd you think of it?
Well, I mean, obviously it was terrible. But, I've been thinking this entire time, ever since watching it, I don't know if it was ever intended to be good. I don't know why Sony decided to make this movie, but I'm almost certain it wasn't with the intent to make a good film. Think about it. They hired Burke Sharpless and Matt Sazama. Sazama, the guys that did Morbius. They hired the same people who created one of the worst flops in Sony's history, universally considered one of the worst movies ever made. Right? They got a director who is known for nothing. I mean, basically a few television shows. I don't even remember her name.
S.J. Clarkson is her name.
S.J. Clarkson.
And I think her real claim to fame is she directed that unaired pilot for Game of Thrones. You know, the one we never saw?
Oh, right.
Yeah, that one. That masterpiece, apparently.
One that had completely different actors?
Yes, that one, yeah. So part of this train wreck was just a ton of reshoots, overdubs, things like that. And wasn't a good chunk of that because they decided to change the timeline, like when the dates of the film took place? Okay,
we don't know anything for certain, but Hollywood Insider named Jeff Snyder reported that it was originally set in the 90s. Remember, the movie as we know it is set in 2003.
Right.
So we're assuming it would have been a decade earlier. And the reason for this was apparently that their original idea was that the Peter, who they never name, born at the end of the movie, was originally supposed to be Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. So that would have put the birth in the 90s.
Wait, so were they planning to make this film back before the MCU and before Spider-Man came to the MCU?
So what I understand is that it wasn't that he was ever supposed to be in the movie. They just wanted it to be consistent with the Spider-Man timeline. They wanted it to tie in directly to the Garfield movies.
So the movies that they made themselves.
Right.
Okay.
But apparently at some point, and it may have been late in production, they decided to tie it into Tom Holland's Spider-Man instead, which meant moving the timeline up about a decade.
Was that possibly, you think Disney could have forced them to do that?
I have no idea. And Snyder never said that, and he was just relaying what he had been told. He said that when everything he heard about the movie up until like the final months of production is it was set in the 90s. And a lot of people argue that the way they dress is more in line with 90s than the early 2000s.
I thought that myself. I noticed some really chunky shoes, on some of those girls, right? No, I can totally see that, though. I feel like we would have had some different music.
Well, I mean, we'll probably get there in a bit, but I mean, it seems to be the case that the song Toxic, which actually didn't release as a single until a year after this, even if the movie was set in 2003, but it's unlikely that Toxic was the original song playing during that scene.
That would make sense, especially if it happened in the 90s.
If you look at the scene, we have the DJ saying this song is going to be huge, or this, it was either the song or the pop artist. Wouldn't make any sense if it was Britney Spears, because Britney Spears was already huge.
Exactly.
But also, when the girls mention Britney Spears, you can't see their faces. So that was probably another instance of the overdub. Of being overdubbed.
Right.
So whatever the song was when this scene was originally seen, probably was not Toxic from Britney Spears.
I'd like to know what it was. If it was possibly forced by Disney to do this, I feel like a lot of their contract with Disney could have been a big part of the problem with this whole thing, right?
I mean, I think their contract with Disney, this weird splitting of Spider-Man, has been the cause of just about every flop in the Spideyverse, hasn't it?
Right. Well, I mean, you can't have Spider-Man. How do you have these Spider-Man adjacent characters when you don't have Spider-Man?
They wouldn't even name the baby that everyone knows was Peter Parker.
Right. That was awkward too, but I actually found it more awkward that they wouldn't say May's name.
Yeah.
Remember when she asks Ben what this woman he's met, what her name is, and he just looks at her and she's like, "Oh, it's serious." That was the weirdest interaction in the whole film, I think.
But that doesn't really stand out because all of the interactions between human beings, supposed human beings in this movie, it's like robots. Okay, so we've discussed some of the general problems with the movie and the issues in production leading up to it. So let's talk about the actual movie now. And things do not get better from here. I'm sorry, folks. I'll be honest, watching this movie was just confusing at times. The editing was so bad in places, like it was so jarring that I thought, like, I actually rewinded several times thinking I had missed something.
I did too.
A good example, the opening scene where they are just throwing exposition all over the audience, just spewing it like vomit.
Yeah. Explain it all.
Right, when she's taking pictures of the web, and then suddenly she doubles over and says she doesn't want me to continue my work or something like that. I had no idea who she was talking to or who she was talking about.
I was right there with you.
I actually backed that scene up because I assumed there was this mysterious person had been mentioned at some point.
Right. I didn't know what had happened either. I thought maybe she'd been bit by a spider or something.
Yeah.
And then on the second rewatch, I realized, she's pregnant.
She's pregnant. That's the baby.
Right.
And that was hardly the only moment that was jarring.
No, I found later on when she gets her seeing the future every now and then, when it's handy ability, to be super jarring the way they kept doing it. Mm-hmm. Because in some scenes, they just didn't make any sense. It was no longer coherent. Because
a good example is the scene where her boss ends up dying.
Yes.
Right. The stuff right before that where she has the blood on her hands and then she doesn't, and there's a dead person and there's not. That was, first of all, the scene dragged on way too long. And secondly, it was confusing. It
was very confusing. Especially, I was really shocked how she just left the guy she was working on, right?
Right.
Just abandoned this guy to die. Let me go talk to my caps for a minute, see if I can get him to not drive away, even though I don't realize I can see the future yet. Plus, she hadn't seen anything about him, or at least in our view or our perspective, right?
Right.
So we don't know why she's trying to talk to him and make him stop driving away.
Exactly. Yeah, it made no sense because you don't see that, you don't get that flash forward until after she walks up to him. Right.
Maybe if they would have shown her see the ambulance collision that he had beforehand, we would understand why she's running him down trying to stop him.
Because it made no sense. Like, there were people dying and she's just suddenly she wants to drive.
Yeah, exactly.
That entire scene made no sense.
Right. I thought she was just trying to get away from the scene at first because it was driving her crazy, the thing she was seeing.
But this is part of the problem. There were so many different reshoots and language dubs that we don't know what that scene would have looked like originally.
That's very true. I think you can make that argument for the entire film, though.
That's particularly true for any scene involving, and I hate to even call him that, Ezekiel Sims.
Right, because
basically nothing like Ezekiel.
What did he have to do with the comic character? Then again, what did anyone have to do with the comic character they're based on in this?
Some of them seem to be weird amalgamations of different comic characters. Like Cassandra herself seemed to be a combination of Cassandra Webb and the second Spider Girl,
Julia Carpenter.
Carpenter,
right? Yeah,
who
Spider Woman
was also. Oh, was it Spider Woman? Right.
Yeah,
right. Who was also Sydney Sweeney's character?
Yes, exactly.
Before she was married, what is it? Cornwall
in this, Julia Cornwall.
So they're both kind of playing the same character in a way.
Well, sort of. So Julia Carpenter is the second Spider Woman. She also takes over being Madam Web later on from Cassandra Webb. So it's really strange that they have her here with no powers at all, and it's just really weird.
Well,
really
the
weird.
jacket, for example, because she's clearly Cassandra Webb in the movie, right? But the jacket, Julia wore that.
I don't know why they did that, but you're right. It is sort of a weird amalgamation.
Now, a lot of people argue that Ezekiel, and it's true, Ezekiel is very little like he is in the actual comic books. I mean, he was kind of a mentor to Peter before he betrayed him and then died saving his life, introduced him to spider totems and the Great Web. And I mean, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, he never wore a suit, did he? Or a Spidey suit?
No, never.
He just wore like a business. He was just a wealthy businessman who also had powers like Peter.
Exactly. So him showing up in the suit, crawling on the walls.
Well, that's why people think that his character, that they merged him with Kane.
Okay.
So it would have been Ezekiel Sims and like just a combination of Sims and Kane.
I guess I can kind of see that, but that's a terrible idea.
Just about everything in this movie was a terrible idea.
Couldn't they just use Kane as the villain?
Probably would have made more sense.
We could have Ezekiel Sims as a separate character. Mm-hmm. Maybe he could have explained to Cassandra Webb what was going on a little bit.
Would have been nice.
I don't know. I felt like you had a superhero film with no superheroes in it.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Right?
I mean, Madam Web is probably the absolute worst comic book character you could pick to make the lead in a movie.
Right, like she sees the future. She's psychic. That's
Right.
it.
She's psychic, clairvoyant,
She's blind.
and she can see the Great Web.
Exactly.
Right? She has gifts that have helped Peter quite a bit in the comics at times.
Yeah,
But she would be great in a Spider-Man movie helping Peter.
She was always an ancillary character.
Right.
Always. So why have her try to lead the film?
That's a good question. I mean, why not? You've got 3 different Spider-Woman / girls in it.
Yep.
Why not make the movie about one of them?
Well, that's what I thought it was going to be. You know, at the beginning, we see Ezekiel have this vision of the 3 of them in their spider suits. Awesome powers, right? Doing cool stuff. I thought in the film they would gain their powers. We're going to see how this happened. And it never does.
No. In fact, we still have no idea how it doesn't even hint at how they get their powers.
No. We can assume it has something to do with Cassandra Webb because they're hanging out with her.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, she sees it in the future. Could it be the spider that he still has in that tank, presumably?
I wouldn't think it'd give all 3 their powers. I don't know.
I mean, that's not how they got their powers in the comics.
No.
I mean, Cassandra
She was a
born with her
mutant.
powers. She was a mutant.
Of course, we can't have mutants in Sony.
Right.
Right. But it's just, I don't know. The whole thing seems ridiculous. The fact that you have these 3 superheroes you show and then they never show up in the film. You have Ezekiel, who seems to get some kind of powers he didn't even have. And you have Cassandra Webb, who is a side character that is the driving force.
What power didn't he have in the comics?
Well, he didn't crawl on walls, did he?
Yeah, he had every power Spider-Man had in the comics.
I just remember him being sort
When
of a
they
mentor,
meet,
knowing it.
he's just like an older version of Peter. That's why he's like Peter's mentor for a while.
Right. See, I thought he had the spider sense and like the strength and stuff. I just didn't think he could climb on. Well, I guess because he didn't sling webs.
No, he even had the poison. Well, remember, Peter didn't sling webs.
No,
himself
exactly.
as power.
Himself, he didn't have that.
He had
Yeah.
cartridges.
Well,
Depending on which version.
depending on the film, but yeah, in the comics, he didn't
comics
have
it's
it.
a
Yeah.
cartridge.
So yeah, we have no real. I don't feel like we have a lead for the film. Honestly, it's supposed to be Cassandra Webb, but she's not.
Well, it's a superhero flick that doesn't have any cool superhero scenes. I mean, the closest we get is really dumb. It's the one where Ezekiel puts on the Spidey suit and beats up the cops for no reason. I mean, think about that. He's got them exactly where he wants them, right?
Mm-hmm.
This woman has interfered. He doesn't know how because he doesn't know she sees the future. And suddenly she is getting arrested. Would have left the girls perfectly alone.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he intervenes and knocks out all the cops. And somehow she's still the bad guy?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he killed any of them, but he at least seriously wounded, like 5 cops?
Yeah, I'm sure he had to kill somebody in that.
And yet the APB was still out just for her for kidnapping? What, did they think that a woman that's like a $1.30 soaking wet took out 5 armed police officers?
Probably, yeah. Let's not forget that she stole a cab.
And drove it for like the rest
of the damn movie. Like, how do you still... I know she pulled the license plate off of it, right?
Right.
But what sense does it make? Cabs have like DOT numbers and cab identification numbers all over them.
I mean, look, there's so many problems with that movie. I don't think most people are going to be complaining too much about the cab.
You got a good point. Okay, so our characters are very different from the comic book characters in this, right? Cassandra Webb, our 3 spider women, they don't even have their powers yet, so we don't know how different they are. You have no lead, as I said, a superhero film with no superheroes, some god-awful stilted dialogue, right? These writers, well, obviously, they're the same people that did Morbius.
And we have no idea what this original script looked like.
No, that's true.
Ezekiel, for example, he's the biggest offender in terms of was it called ADR?
Right, yeah, so they're basically
like overdubbing.
Overdubbing, yeah.
It may be a full half of his dialogue is either spoken with his back to the camera or him out of frame, or sometimes with his mouth just not moving and words are just magically appearing.
Yeah, that was terrible. Honestly, I remember in the very first scene of the film where he says a line that does not even fit in about those powers are wasted here.
It's when he's talking to
Cassie's mom, yeah,
at the beginning, and she gives you that big exposition about the what are they called, the Las Arañas?
Yeah.
And she says, she's just saying that, well, that's fiction. I base my work on science. And then he responds with that.
Yeah, those powers are wasted here. How does that make
powers?
sense? So yeah, that it seems to be a big sticking point with him. So maybe most of his scenes were already filmed early on. I don't know.
So maybe they couldn't get him back. That tends to be that's the speculation I've seen. He was one of the few actors that was doing something else at the time, and they could not get back for reshoots. So they tried to do everything with overdubbing. And I think that accounts for why so many of his scenes just seem so odd. You remember the scene where he sleeps with the NSA agent?
The NSA agent. That was so strange.
The conversation they have in bed.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to make any sense at all. Her reaction to what he's saying.
Like she's just completely cool with the fact that he's having these visions about people killing him. And then he starts talking about the NSA technology, and that's when she goes for her gun and he just kills her. But she had no problem with him talking about having visions of these three women destroying him.
So I think the reason that so many of these scenes, particularly with him, felt awkward is because they weren't the original scenes at all. And I think the people around him were probably responding to completely different dialogue at times.
That's a good point. Okay, speaking of that scene, how the hell does this NSA technology that he stole work?
Okay.
I don't understand because he had to have just described them to the computers, right?
I have no idea, but it seems to me that they are just kind of gesturing broadly at 9/11 era surveillance technology.
So to clarify, he has only seen them in visions.
Right.
He doesn't have pictures of them.
And he's only seen them. Remember, those visions, they were in superhero costumes with masks.
So
what seems to have happened is this. He sees the visions with them in their superhero costumes roughly a decade later.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then is somehow able to describe them near perfectly, somehow describe their real faces.
Okay.
And then using the 9/11 era technology, they de-age them and come up with basically perfect pictures of these three women.
That makes so much sense.
Painful.
It's terrible. And then they track them down like
I think mostly using, though it's a bit inconsistent, mostly using traffic cameras. She seems to be tapped into, I don't know, the traffic camera.
Real time tapped into them.
Seems to be.
2003.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's some serious technology. And imagine if this has been in the 90s, right? How would they even work that out?
It didn't really make sense for 2003.
Honestly, it doesn't make sense for today. I don't think you could describe someone to AI and they could create that image. So
no, of course not.
So unless you can go in and read someone's mind, that's the only way you get it. So none of that made sense, which led us to one of the worst quotes of the damn film, where I
know exactly which one you're thinking.
Where he's looking down at his little underling who's having trouble locating the girls, right? And he says, "I went through a lot of trouble to steal this technology for you, or this tech for you. Use it better."
Well, to be clear, that's what you hear. I don't know what he said. I mean, let's be honest.
Okay, that's very true. It was god awful.
We have no idea what line the actor actually spoke there.
Okay, so again, you have nothing making sense, right?
Oh no, nope.
Terrible special effects, terrible fight scenes. What about this? There is no character development in the whole fucking movie.
No, they're the same characters at the end that they were at the beginning.
The three annoying teenagers are still three annoying teenagers at the end of the film.
Right.
You just found out that they have parent issues, right? Mm-hmm. Their parents aren't there for them.
And the jaded 30-year-old is still a jaded 30-year-old.
But for some reason, in the last scene, she tells this nurse at the hospital, "No, they're my family. They're mine. They're mine." You hated these girls. You saved their lives, but you couldn't stand them, right?
I think they were going for some sort of adopted family kind of story, like something like maybe The Last of Us. Oh, God. But no, did not work out at all.
Don't buy it for a second. Okay, like if she cared so much about them, why did she just keep leaving them alone, right? Save them from Ezekiel.
And then drop them off in the middle of the woods.
Middle of the damn woods and take off.
A lot of people, when they talk about this, they're more concerned with the fact that the idiots then went to the diner. I would expect a bunch of 17-year-olds to do something stupid.
Exactly.
It's the 30-year-old, 35-year-old, or whatever, however old she was.
She went 30 if the timeline's right. 30.
Okay. That I would have expected not to leave a bunch of kids alone in the woods with a crazy person after them.
Right, exactly. So, and then she tells them, don't do dumb things, which is another all-time great
exact
line.
Quote, by the way.
Yeah, great line. Don't do dumb things. No, you say, stay here, stay put, don't move, or maybe just don't leave them.
And when they ask for food, maybe tell them you'll bring them some.
Yeah, don't just leave them there with a pack of peanuts or whatever they had. They had something, but whatever, right? They didn't have any food. They're hungry. They're teenagers, for God's sake.
And of course, this leads us up to the diner scene, which didn't make any sense to begin with because, I mean, let's ignore the music. I mean, it is a cool mystery trying to figure out what song might have actually been playing there.
Yeah.
But how exactly does he find them at the diner? Because in the movie, someone calls the police.
Yes.
And then he taps into the scanner. But do you remember how he knew it was them?
Honestly, no.
He's holding a newspaper with their pictures. Daniel, this happened like 3 hours ago.
That's true. Yeah.
And he's got a damn newspaper with all of their pictures in it.
I was more concentrating at this point on the whole, like, mystery of Cassie trying to figure out where in the song she was on the radio to see how much time she had to get there. Which makes no sense because Toxic is one of the songs that repeats the same damn lines
over and over. How would you ever know?
Yeah, right. Like, I guess if it had been a different song that, actually had lyrics you would know that you could understand. Like, for instance, it would never been Hotel California. You can tell where you are in the lyrics about what's going on. Toxic, no damn clue. Same line over and over and over. It made no damn sense, right? I guess you're just counting down to the end of the damn song. And then she gets, like, you see her get there, but it's a vision and she gets stabbed and you think she's been stabbed and something interesting's happened, but then she flashes back and then runs into him with a fucking car because that's all she can do to him. Is hit him with a damn car.
And do we ever get an explanation as to why she's immune to his poison?
Well,
did he just not hold her long enough?
I think he just didn't hold her because it did hurt. Maybe he didn't hold her long enough, or maybe it was the fact that she has that same venom in her system.
Maybe so. Maybe.
I don't know. Because her mother was bit by that spider a few seconds before she was born.
Oh, which brings us to another question. Unless there's something else about the diner you want to talk about.
I think I know what you're going to say here.
So look, admittedly, Dan, I'm not great with geography. I could not today point out Peru on a map. But I at least thought, I understood at least that you can't take a taxi to it from New York, right?
I don't think so.
It's not like a direct shot.
Right.
Because Peru seems to be about 5 minutes from everywhere.
Apparently. A geographical oddity, as it were. Exactly. If I can quote, "Oh, brother, where art thou?" Just about 5 minutes from everywhere, or 2 weeks, as it were there. But, how we have an uncontacted tribe. Mm-hmm. This woman dies giving birth. They have her baby. Mm-hmm. The uncontacted tribe in Peru.
Right.
How does she get back to the U.S. to go into the foster care system, make it to New York?
Well, Dan, as best I can tell, they called a cab and she took the 5-minute ride back to New York.
And then later on, she takes the 5-minute ride down there to find them. How in the name of God did she find them that fast when she got there?
Dude, how did she get there that
uncharted
fast? Okay, think about this. Think about this for a second. The scene we were just talking about, the diner scene. Mm-hmm. Do you know how much movie is left when we get to that scene?
Not that much.
About a half hour.
Right.
The movie is nearly 2 hours. Mm-hmm. The diner scene takes place with about a half hour left remaining.
Right. She takes him and drops off a bin.
She goes to Peru sometime between there, about halfway between there and the end of the movie. So she ends up going to Peru like 15 minutes before the end of the movie.
And she meets up with this guy that's been looking for her whole life. Somehow he recognizes her, hadn't seen her since she was a baby.
But knows exactly who she is and why she's there.
Yeah, and teaches her how to use the Force. No, the Great Web, sorry, not the Force.
Looks a little more like the, from Final Fantasy?
The live stream.
Yeah, it looked a lot like the live stream.
Man, it would have been better if it had been, right? So somehow she gets back there, she finds the guy. He explains to her about her mother. He knows who she is.
And then they butchered the hell out of the Spider-Man quote.
I guess you're not allowed to use the same quote.
Then come up with something new. What is it he
says? When you accept great responsibility,
great power will come. or follow.
Great power follow. Yeah, it was terrible.
And then this great power ends up being her sending shadow people out in like 3 different places.
Life force people out. And,
you'll be able to be in different places at the same time.
But they can't do anything.
But that's the thing. She has no normal superpowers. Like Madam Web in the comics, like she was helpful because she could see the great web. She was psychic. Right? She had information that Spider-Man did not have and could not get anywhere else.
Yes.
That's what made her a powerful figure. She wasn't a fighter. So what does it matter if Cassie can send out 3 useless, perfectly mortal, non-superpowered versions of herself?
Well,
because if you're a Spidey, like if you're a spider totem, seems like you could just kick all 3 of their asses.
You'd think so, right? But I guess they could go out and say, here, let me help you up, dust off your knees there.
Who thought that scene was going to be epic? When she just stands there and puts her hands out, and then she hears the voice that she... Because it's supposed to be the epic callback, right? Like she's hearing the mentor's voice in her head.
He said it to her 5 minutes ago.
He said it to her like 5 or 10 minutes ago. Like that's what we're cutting back to. And then she just, crazy. if you haven't seen the movie, I envy you. But she just stretches her hands out right next to Ezekiel, right? He could kill her at any second, anytime he chooses. But instead, he just waits and then lets her send out, what would you call them? Clones of herself, little shadow versions, parallel universe versions of herself.
Great web people.
And then they just help the girls up.
Yeah, dust them off, help them up.
Because again, she has no superpowers, or at least no superpowers that would help in this circumstance.
No physical superpowers.
Right, no physical superpowers.
Right, yeah, so she can't really do anything. I think we would have been better off with just another character showing up saving the day. Just let Venom show up at that point.
Well, so a lot of people speculate that at some point, a Spider-Man was supposed to be in this movie.
Well,
now, whether it was supposed to be a Spider-Man she called from a parallel universe, maybe, I don't know.
That would have been
maybe that would have been the cool thing that she does at the end to save them, because that is something she can do. That is a power Madam Web had. So there was some speculation that the reason that the end of this movie was especially awful is because it was originally supposed to be a Spider-Man coming to save the day. And it probably wouldn't have been any mainstream Spider-Man, any of the famous ones that we're familiar with. Probably just a random Spider-Man that she jerked out of whatever timeline he was in.
Still been epic, though.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you would have had an actual Spidey battle.
Yeah. That would be great to see Ezekiel fight actual Spider-Man.
And it still would have been her doing it because she could have still had her heroic moment.
Yeah.
Because she would have been doing exactly the kind of thing Madam Web does.
Yeah, that'd be great. Or, God forbid, at some point in the film, the girls could have gotten their powers and they could have just fought him.
Or, you know what? She could have summoned future versions of them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right? Why not do that?
That would have at least made sense with his vision, right?
Right, exactly.
Why was he even having visions of them if Cassie's the one that killed him?
So she says at the end that it was your destiny was never them, it was me.
That made no sense.
In the visions, it's them. It's clearly them.
So she changed the course of the future, maybe?
That's the idea, I think. That somehow something she did changed history.
I don't know.
But they actually, but they were trying to, it seemed to me they were trying to mix 2 things, right? Like the trope where you're trying to avoid your known future and you end up causing it.
Right.
Right. That trope on the one hand, and then trying to mesh that with her using her powers to change the future. And you can't really do both of those.
I know. So
it seems like to me you got to pick one of the two. Either he causes his own death by trying to change it, or you have Cassie change the future.
You would think that when he saw them all in one place, he'd be like, maybe I shouldn't mess with them because this is going to, forge a bond with them. And maybe he's just not that bright. I don't know. Well, he seems to, he was bright enough to find an NSA woman and kill her, get her password and everything. I don't know. It's terrible. It was so terrible.
The whole movie is just garbage.
It really was. And it pains me that I've watched it as many times as I have to prepare for this. And I'm not even counting the times I had to rewind while watching it to figure out what the hell just happened.
I only watched it twice. Like, I'll be honest with you, there were scenes that gave me a headache. One of the few action sequences in the movie where Ezekiel is jumping between the traffic.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many just jarring cuts in that scene. It was
it was
I started
bad.
to get sick watching it. I just couldn't do it.
No, and I agree. I kept having that same trouble for some reason when she'd flip back over and over, like the scene with the fire.
Yeah.
It just kept flipping back and forth. That was jarring, very jarring to me. So yeah, I hate when I watch a movie and it fucking gives me a headache or makes me feel sick. I hate that shit. And this seems to be a common theme with these terrible movies we're watching so far.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can find something that doesn't
Poor
do that.
cinematography.
Poor ass cinematography.
I mean, at least in the last one, it was terrible animation.
Yeah, this one was just didn't know how to shoot a damn film.
I mean, let's be as fair as possible because they did have to do a ton of rewrites and reshoots. So we don't know what they were working with.
No, that's a good point. But I mean, you could tell though that the actors were just done with it when they filmed it.
I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, what's her name?
Dakota Johnson.
Yeah. She seemed like she was on a bottle of Xanax the whole movie. Like same in the interview. She checked out completely.
You know, I would think you might have to be when you keep getting handed a different script over and over and they keep changing everything.
Yeah, and she said in interviews that she said there were drastic changes to the script.
Oh yeah, I think she said filming it was psychotic was the word she used, right? And you know, even like in her press tour later on, you could tell she was just done. She wanted nothing else to do with this film.
Honestly, all of them seemed that way at some point.
Oh yeah. Like, I feel like the only person that really held it together through filming was Adam Scott.
He was the only like decent actor. I mean, well, look, I don't want to say he was the only decent actor, but he was the only one that I think had any decent scenes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But see, I think I've seen Dakota Johnson in stuff where she was fine. Like,
well, that's why I said I didn't want to say he was the only good actor, but I do think he had some of the only decent scenes in the movie.
And Sydney Sweeney, I've seen do some great performances actually.
I don't really care like how good her scenes are as long as she's in them.
She's a talented actress. That's all we know about her.
It was also smoking hot.
All right, so which is probably why they cast her in this. But then she wasn't ever they didn't show that off at all. So
there's evidence from interviews she did that suggests she thought she was joining the MCU. So
really?
At some point, I think she honestly believed that she was going to be a superhero in this movie. So there was an interview where a journalist asked her if she was excited to join the MCU. And she said that she couldn't talk about it. She was really excited, but right now she couldn't speak on it. Which seems to imply she thought she was early on when she signed.
I can see why you would think that. And honestly, if she was going to be Spider-Woman, that's a pretty major character.
Exactly.
Like she's right up there with like Black Cat. Right. So,
I mean, if you have Julia Carpenter, why not just make the movie about her?
I agree. She was probably the most famous character in the.
Let's be honest. Yeah. Even if that movie had been terrible, are you going to tell me that Sydney Sweeney in that suit couldn't have sold that movie?
Oh, she could have sold the movie. I think just making a Spider-Woman film would have sold the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, can you make a Spider-Woman film if you can't make a Spider-Man film?
I don't know. But they could make Venom.
They made Venom, yeah. Well, Venom's not called Spider anything, though.
Well, I don't think Spider, I don't think they have Spider trademarked.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. It's just really, there's a lot of strangeness in this. There's a lot of just awkwardness. And I feel like a ton of awkwardness has come from the fact that they're trying to do Spider-Man characters without Spider-Man existing.
It's kind of a shame because they had some really interesting characters, at least from the comic books. Like Aranya, interesting.
Right.
What's her name in the movie? They had
Anya.
Anya. They had a correct name. She's interesting. What little I've seen in the comics, and of course Ezekiel is an excellent character.
Right.
So, for the limited time he's there.
I mean, Madam Web is an interesting character.
She cannot lead a movie.
No,
she doesn't have those kind of powers.
She didn't have those kind of powers until she was blind and crippled. And
there is a reason that Professor X is not the main character of the X-Men movies.
Right. Even in the prequels where he's sort of leading it while he's walking around, he's got Magneto with him.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
He's a psychic type Pokemon mutant. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's a rule. They can't lead stuff.
So, okay. That's a huge problem with this, right? But like we said, she could have led the movie. It could have been a Spider-Woman movie. For sure.
And she could have played an important role.
Well, she was probably she's arguably the biggest name in the film.
I mean, so let's think about this. Because if I remember, because it's been a while. But I don't think those three were ever together in the comics. Were
No.
Okay.
You have two Spider-Woman women and one Spider-Girl
didn't even
right
exist
here.
at the same time, right?
Right. Well, they may have existed at the same time, but they were drastically different, like different characters.
Well, I was thinking they were different continuities, though, weren't they?
Not necessarily different continuities. It was just different storylines where they came in.
Why not have Madam Web bring them together? Someone who can literally reach through space and time to gather spider totems. Why not have her just yank them forward?
You would think that would be great, right? But no.
Like, the end of that movie might have actually been pretty decent if she'd have summoned the future versions of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think the purpose of this film was to introduce Spider-Woman because, like I said, Sydney Sweeney is the biggest name in the film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you could argue it's Dakota Johnson, but I'm pretty sure it's
Sydney Sweeney.
I mean, I'm more familiar with Adam Scott, but that's just because I'm a huge fan of Parks and Rec. But
it just seems to me that there is a good movie, not in here, right? Because I think they did the best they could, and sadly, with the material they had. But there's got to be a script that someone could write that had these characters in it that was actually good.
Well, they didn't have the right writer.
Maybe a Madam Web led team of Spider women / girls.
Well, maybe they should have tried to hire James Gunn to do their universe instead of letting DC get a hold of him. I feel like your entire SSU, Sony Spider-Man universe, doesn't have a lead, though. That's the problem.
No, it doesn't.
Maybe they wanted Venom to be the lead.
I think that's obviously the case, but I mean, those movies, I think they did decent at the box office, but I don't think they've ever been they've never had a big hit, have they?
No. I liked the first Venom film, but it just
not
wasn't
since
great.
the Raimi trilogy. I don't think Sony's had anything with Spider-Man that was a huge hit, have they?
No, I loved Andrew Garfield.
Oh, I did too.
But no,
but they weren't big like the Raimi trilogy.
No, they weren't. Definitely not. So yeah, it's been a flop, and
let's also be clear, they weren't as good as the Raimi trilogy either.
No, well,
maybe better than 3.
Three was
not better than 1 and 2.
No, definitely not. Now, from what I understand, they've completely shut down SSU, right? Are they still making that Spider-Man noir show?
Okay, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure of that either. I know they said they've shut it down, but I've also read that they're still making that Spider-Man noir show. I don't know how. I don't know if anyone really knows, honestly. But honestly, after Craven, I can understand shutting it down. I only made like halfway through the film. I just couldn't watch it anymore.
I never even saw it, so
like maybe we should talk about it later because it was bad, but it wasn't like train wreck bad like this was.
Oh, I want to do Devil May Cry next week.
Okay, we can give that a shot. Though honestly, like let's not promise anyone because if it doesn't work out, we're gonna find something much worse to do. That's true. So, yeah. So we've had
tentatively we plan to do Devil May Cry, the new Netflix adaptation.
Yeah,
not the Japanese made stuff.
I'm actually like I didn't realize it was supposed to be that bad. I was actually looking forward to watching it. So
the same thing that always happens when Westerners try to write Japanese properties.
I thought Castlevania worked out pretty well.
Okay, I take that back. That
or at least the first season or 2 seasons of it.
Right? Okay, at least the first season of Castlevania was amazing.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, so I don't know. I want to see Devil May Cry, but now you've got me scared of it. So damn. At any rate, though, this was Madam Web, and I think it was excellently terrible, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see you guys next week and see what we've come up with.